Alright, beautiful beings, before we get started with today's story, I just wanted to say thank you for the overwhelming support and love you guys have shown me, and thank you for joining me on my journey. Also, I want to thank today's video sponsor, Dubby Energy. Today's video is brought to you by Dubby Energy, the ultimate energy drink designed for gamers, creators, and anyone who needs a boost without the crash. Unlike those other energy drinks loaded with sugar and junk, Dubby is packed with clean ingredients to fuel your focus, energy, and performance all day long. Whether you're grinding through a gaming session or just need that extra push to get through your day, Dubby's got you covered. And the best part, it's jitter-free. No weird crashes, just clean, sustained energy. Check out the link in the description below and use my code WETT at checkout to save 20% off your order. Yes, that's right, not 10, but a whopping 20% off. Power up with Dubby Energy and stay on top of your game. A huge thank you to Dubby for sponsoring this video. Alright, let's dive into today's video. Justin and I had been together for 10 years, married for 6. I had been with him for my whole adult life. We'd been dating since I was 17 and he was 18. I always thought he was my soulmate, the man I wanted to grow old with. Turns out, I was wrong. I was devastated when I found out. Yes, Justin had been staying out later than usual, and his explanations were usually flimsy at best. I'm not stupid. I had my suspicions, but I think I just really didn't want to come to terms with the fact that my husband was seeing another woman. Honestly, I might have gone years without discovering the truth. But Justin got sloppy. Welcome home, honey. Fun night out with the guys after work again. Uh-huh, Justin grumbled, brushing past me. I made dinner if you're hungry. Beef tips and rice. I know it's one of your favourites. 8 at the bar. I'm going to bed, he muttered, steadying himself against the wall before woozily clomping up the stairs. My heart sank. Nights like those were becoming more and more frequent. I loved my husband. All I wanted was to spend a little quality time with him after a long day at work, but he couldn't even spare me a few minutes. I glanced up at him as he lumbered up the steps, a tear trickling down my cheek. In an instant, any sadness that I felt was replaced with burning rage, because when Justin passed underneath the overhead light, I saw what appeared to be a hickey on the side of his neck. A cocktail of emotions swirled within me. Despair, resentment, betrayal. They all hit me like a ton of bricks. I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. I mean, who would? The man I'd been head over heels for all that time had stabbed me in the back. I was in disbelief. I stumbled to the kitchen, pulling out a chair before I could collapse. I stared into space, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. I sat there for a long time, deep in thought. After a while, I felt numb, like my entire personality had been flushed down the drain, leaving nothing but an empty husk. Then, a thought flashed across my mind. I'd been mistaken. That had to be it. Just a mere trick of the light. It was a pretty dimly lit hallway after all. Whatever the case, I had to know. I tiptoed upstairs, abandoning my dinner. I crept up to our room as quiet as a church mouse, before lightly pushing open the bedroom door. Justin was fast asleep. I didn't waste any time. I rushed across the room, careful to avoid any squeaky floorboards, and I inspected Justin's neck. His snores grew louder as I approached. He always was a heavy sleeper. I cursed when I got a closer look. Justin was sleeping on his side, and I was not going to try to roll him over. I glanced around, searching for anything that might provide concrete evidence. My eyes fell to the bedside table. Bingo! I snatched Justin's phone from his charger. I held my breath as I pressed his meaty thumb onto the screen to unlock it. I grinned, feeling a rush of exhilaration as I achieved my goal. I froze. Justin groggily opened his eyes a sliver as my hand hovered over him. My blood turned to ice, and I prayed with all my might that my husband would just go back to sleep. To my immense shock, my prayers were answered. Justin mumbled incoherently under his breath before grabbing a fistful of covers and nodding off. I'd escaped by the skin of my teeth. I had to be more careful. The first thing I did was check Justin's texts. I immediately saw a woman's name I didn't recognise. My heart shattered when I read the messages. "Hey baby, last night was incredible. See you again after work today. You're damn right. I wish you never had to leave. What about that wife of yours though? Won't she get suspicious? Her? Not a chance. Even if she does find out, she won't leave. I could murder a baby in front of her and she'd still think I was a saint." A deep-seated rage bubbled within me. Did Justin really think that little of me? He clearly saw me as nothing more than a spineless, codependent pushover. Well, I'd show him. I screenshotted the evidence, scrolling through dozens of nude photos that I hadn't taken, and sent everything to my number. I deleted any proof of my snooping, then replaced Justin's phone on the charger. I stormed out of the room, grabbing my keys as I went. I made it halfway across the living room when the realisation hit me. I had nowhere to go. All my family lived 7 hours away. It was too late to book a decent hotel, and I really didn't want to drag any of my friends into my drama. Not yet, at least. That left me with one option. I had to sleep on the couch. I plopped down onto the sofa and sighed. I didn't want to have to confront it, but I knew what I had to do. In the morning, I was going to find a lawyer and start the divorce process. The thought alone was enough to break me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I cried like a baby, silently sobbing into a scratchy pillow for what must have been hours. My eyes were puffy by the time I was done. I couldn't fathom falling asleep in a state like that, but I must have at some point. Because the next thing I remember, sunlight was flooding through the blinds. "Morning, babe. How'd you—" The rest of the sentence caught in my throat. That was right. Justin and I were about to be over. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, tears stinging at the corners of my vision. I opened up the text I'd sent myself as proof that the past 12 hours hadn't been some twisted nightmare. But the messages were gone. My eyes grew wide as I stared at the screen. That couldn't be right. They'd been there, clear as day the night before. Something wasn't adding up. I suddenly paused, bolting upright. Was that breakfast? The tantalising aroma of eggs and bacon wafted around the corner from the kitchen. My brows furrowed. Justin never cooked. My breathing was shallow as I tentatively shuffled toward the kitchen. Curiosity gnawed at me like a piranha. I apprehensively peeked around the corner, unsure of what I would find. To my shock, there was my husband, humming a little tune while flipping pancakes. I rubbed my eyes. Was I seeing things? Surely I was delusional from lack of sleep. That had to have been it. Then Justin turned, his icy blue eyes locking onto mine. "Morning, princess. I hope you're hungry. I saw you sleeping on the couch, and I thought you might not be feeling well, so I decided to make you a hot meal to help you get better." My heart skipped a beat. Was this really my husband? It looked like him, sounded like him too. Still, I was weary. Yeah, just feeling a little under the weather is all. Are you feeling okay? You're acting different. Never been better. Honestly, I think I've really turned a new leaf, he said, placing a steaming plate before me. The old Justin is kaput. husband I can be. Our gazes connected, and I searched his expression for answers. He seemed genuine. If this was an act, it was a damn good one. Thanks, babe. That really makes me happy to hear. Justin beamed at me, the warmth of his smile seeping into my heart. It had been years since he looked at me like that. Well, get used to it, because I'm keeping my word. I love you, Lydia. I wanted to be suspicious. I wanted to remain silent. I wanted to keep my guard up. But how could I? All I needed was love and attention, and I was finally getting it. For the first time in a long time, it felt like my husband actually cared. I love you too, Justin, I muttered before digging into my meal. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. A big part of me was still leery of my husband. His timing was pretty convenient after all. But even with all my doubts, Justin was seemingly sticking to his promise. He took me out on dates, paid to get my nails done, bought me flowers. He even started shouldering most of the housework. Needless to say, I was impressed. If he would have kept that up, I might have never suspected a thing. But one night, he slipped up. We were cuddled up on the couch, watching The Truman Show, when I asked. Now, I wish I would have kept my mouth shut. Hey, babe. Yes, my love, Justin asked, his eyes still glued to the screen. If someone close to you is an imposter, like a perfect replica except for a few tiny changes, do you think you'd notice? Justin tensed up, his eyes wide as he slowly turned to face me. A blank stare had overtaken his expression. A chill rippled through my body when he looked at me like that. He was beginning to frighten me. I suppose so. Why do you ask? His voice was monotone, dripping with a tinge of urgency. I didn't know how to process his sudden shift in personality. It's the premise of the movie we're watching. I watched as the colour seeped back into his face, and he loosened up, breathing a sigh of relief. I cocked a curious brow. Why was he acting so strange? That makes sense. We sat there in uncomfortable silence, shifting our attention back to the TV screen. After a few more tense moments, I couldn't take it anymore. I've got to use the restroom and charge my phone. I'll be right back. No need to pause the movie for me. Justin nodded before grinning up at me. His smile. Had his teeth always been that straight? Okay, baby girl, hurry back. Wouldn't want your spot to get cold. Yeah, sure thing. I practically bolted up the stairs, locking myself in our room. I slumped against the door, trying to steady my palpitating heart. What was going on? Was it just me, or was that some seriously freaky behaviour? Either way, I needed a second to calm down. I had my eyes shut, focusing on my breathing when I heard it. My phone was buzzing from inside my pocket. I hurriedly retrieved it, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. I normally don't answer calls from strangers, but something compelled me. Maybe it was intuition, or perhaps I just wanted someone to talk to other than my husband. In the end, I accepted the call. Hello. Lydia Atkins. Speaking. Look, this is going to sound crazy, but I need you to hear what I have to say. Okay. I suddenly jolted up from my spot on the floor and stared at the locked door separating me from the hallway. Loud knocks rattled it in its frame. Lydia, who are you speaking to? Panic surged through me as I scrambled for an answer. It's my mum. Go back downstairs. I'll be there in a minute. That was him, wasn't it? The caller said. That was my husband, yes. Why do you ask? I whispered, putting as much distance between myself and the door as possible. Lydia, I need you to hear me out. Can you promise me that you will? The pounding on the opposite side of the room grew even louder. Lydia, don't listen to her. She's a fucking liar. My stomach began to twist itself into knots. How did he know? I'm listening. I'll hear what you have to say. The woman on the other end of the line breathed an audible sigh of relief. Okay, my name is Adeline, and Justin and I have been seeing each other for about 9 months. That man in your house is not your husband. My blood turned to ice and I began to tremble. No, that couldn't be true. In a shaky voice, I asked the question that will haunt me until I die. How do I know you're telling the truth? There was a long pause, the bangs outside my door reaching a nauseating crescendo. When Adeline answered, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was in serious danger. Lydia, for the past week, Justin has been living with me. As I got on the elevator, the man getting off whispered something strange to me. Don't get off until you hit the 9th floor. No exceptions. But my interview is on 5, I replied. I'll only say this only one more time. Don't get off until you hit 9th. No other floor is safe. It's crazy, but something about the way he said it penetrated my skull. He was serious, and he looked nervous, like he had to fight every instinct in his body to say that to me. The doors closed while I thought to myself, who the fuck says anything like that? As I went to hit the button for the 5th floor, some anxiety came over me. I shook it off and pressed it. The guy was probably just off his rockers. The elevator went up. I scanned my surroundings. A TV bolted to the top corner of the elevator, playing the Weather Channel, a mirror for the back wall of the elevator, and some cozy, lounge-style music playing. Pretty standard stuff. Now arriving at the 5th floor. Weird. Not sure if I'd ever been in an elevator that announced each floor it was arriving at. I was sure that if I worked in this building, this would get pretty old quickly. Ting! The doors opened on 5. In front of me was a reception area with a woman seated at the front desk. She stood up from her seat. Mr. Davis, you're early. The gentleman's warning from earlier played in my head. We'll be ready for your interview in a few moments. In the meantime, please feel free to take a seat. Thank you, I responded. If I'm, early, maybe I can come back in a few minutes. Nonsense. We'll see if we can speed things up. He's been very excited to meet you. The elevator doors started closing. I held them open. I wasn't sure what to do here, but everything seemed fine enough. Granted, the receptionist did seem a bit eager, but beyond that. From my vantage point, I scanned the office space behind the front desk area. All looked normal. Cubicles, folks clicking away at their computer, a kitchen area. Pretty unremarkable. That is, except for the portrait off at the far end of the office floor. It was very large. I couldn't tell what the picture was of, but I did see a group of employees staring at it, almost admiring it. Your wife's name is Meredith, right? I froze as the receptionist's question shot a dart right through me. I didn't remember the job application form ever asking for my wife's name. You two are thinking of having children, right? If it's a boy, you want to name him Sam. What the fuck? Forget that she was right on the money. This was something I'd never spoken about before to anyone, including my wife. Before I could answer, the office workers surrounding the large portrait started singing the happy birthday song loudly, in complete and perfect unison. Someone brought out a birthday cake and presented it to the portrait. A portrait that, after a bit of squinting, I realised was a very large version of my high school yearbook photo. I backed into the elevator and pressed the closed door button. I panicked as it took its sweet time to register. Press, press, press. Come the fuck on. After what felt doors started closing. As they closed, I heard the receptionist. "I'm so curious to know what your insides taste like, Michael." Fuck. Me. 9th floor. I needed to go to the 9th floor. I found the 9th floor button and pressed it. It felt like it didn't register my push, so I pressed the button again. And again. Come on, come on, come on, 9th fucking floor. I tried again and again, but nothing was happening. Fuck it. I'll go back to the ground floor, I thought to myself. Back to the start. As I went to press the G button, I realised it was missing. Just that one singular button gone. Fuck. I was getting claustrophobic. I took in deep breaths to prevent myself from having a full-blown episode. The elevator started moving up again. A panel above the elevator doors lit up with the following number: 11. Someone was calling the elevator. I started talking to myself to self-soothe. It's okay. Someone will call the 9th floor soon. That's where I'll get off. As the elevator approached its new destination, I noticed that the background lounge music in the elevator had changed. It was now an instrumental arrangement of Happy Birthday. Not sure why this thing thought it was my birthday. I glanced at the weather report on the TV. At least it was going to be sunny all week. Silver linings. Now arriving at the 11th floor. Ding! The doors opened. I hung around the inside corner of the elevator beside the buttons. No need to have another nightmarish experience, right? An old woman stepped onto the elevator. Great. I'm sure this will be easy to explain to her. She smiled at me as the doors closed. With a lump in my throat, I asked, "What floor?" "Ground floor, please." I'm sorry, ma'am, but that button is missing. Maybe we could wait until someone calls us to the 9th floor." "9th? No, I think I'll just go to the 2nd floor instead then." She went to press the button. "Ma'am, I don't think it'd be safe to. I have plenty of friends on the 2nd floor. It'll be okay." And she pressed it. I didn't feel comfortable cornering an elderly stranger in a seemingly haunted elevator. But I tried again to convince her. I know this sounds weird, but I have it under good authority that the 2nd floor probably isn't safe. I'd strongly recommend not getting off until we reach 9. She smiled. "Dear, it'll be all right. You know, I like to take all opportunities that are given to me. It's a shame that you turned your opportunity down. I know the folks on 5 are very disappointed." I backed up into the corner of the elevator. I saw the reflection of the old lady in the elevator's back mirror. She looked ghastly, otherworldly. Now arriving at the 2nd floor, the doors opened. She smiled at me again and then exited. I poked my head around the corner to look at the 2nd floor. It was damp. It looked old, more like a cave than an office. I heard a low rumble. A man dressed in a fancy suit approached the elevator doors and held them open before they could close. "You're getting off here too, champ. I heard that 5 wanted you. I think we can give you a better offer." "I'm good." "You sure, bud? The salary is $800,000 every hour." "I'm good." "I'm kidding, bud. The salary is, we remove your eyes so you don't have to see him." The floor went pitch black. The low rumble got much louder and started reverberating in my ears. Suddenly, the businessman grabbed me by the collar and tried to pull me out of the elevator. I clung on to the ends of it. Fuck! Fuck! I started kicking and headbutting him. I was able to make him let go of me momentarily as I desperately pressed on the close doors button. Miraculously, the elevator responded much quicker this time, and they closed immediately. I tried the 9th floor button again. Didn't work. I pressed 8 instead. Anything to get away from this hellhole of a floor. I heard a loud banging on the door as the elevator started taking off, like an aggressive knock. Bang, bang, bang. as I saw the floor numbers rising. 3, 4, 5. The banging continued, just as loud. What the fuck? 6th floor, 7th floor. The banging on the door didn't subside. Now arriving at the 8th floor, I pressed the button for the 23rd floor. Just as we arrived on 8, I mashed the close doors button just as the elevator doors were about to open. The banging continued as the elevator doors started denting. The elevator continued, going up. 9, 10, 11. The banging softened. 14, 15, and softened. 19, 20, 21, and disappeared. Now arriving at the 23rd floor. It was gone. Thank fucking God, I exhaled. It felt like I'd narrowly avoided disaster. The doors opened. I scanned the new floor and I realised I was back on the ground floor. That's what it looked like anyways. Did I escape? Was I finally free? A man stood not too far from the door. He looked familiar, but I couldn't exactly place him. "Hey man," he spoke. Was this the guy who got off the elevator just as I got on? "Hey, it's over man. You got out," he told me. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I had to fight it. "But you said the 9th floor was the only safe one, right?" "That was a trick. You followed your gut and you were right. 23rd floor, the real safe floor. You can step out now, man." I didn't leave. "There's someone here who really wants to see you." I couldn't move. "He wants to give you a job. He thinks you're going to be great." Why the fuck couldn't I move? "He's in the other room. I'm going to fetch him, okay? All you have to do is look at him. It'll feel a bit weird at first, but then it'll all be okay. It's a permanent position. Great benefits. It is fully on site, but no better birthday present than a new job, right?" I lowered my gaze to the floor. I forced myself to mutter the following words. "It's not my fucking birthday." As he left to fetch, whoever he was meaning to fetch, he gave me the following response. "Relax, man. No cursing on the job. We're a family here." It felt like I could only move a centimetre at a time. A true snail's pace. I inched my finger closer and closer to the close door button. I heard footsteps. He was coming back. With every fibre of my being, I pushed through. I hit the button. The doors closed and I collapsed to the floor, free from whatever weird force was stopping me from moving. "I'll let you two talk more on the elevator," I heard him say from outside the doors. What? Instinctively, I looked around. To my surprise, there was nothing. The elevator was the same as it had always been. A lengthy exhale. I was done with all of this. At this point, I would have taken death over continuing this bullshit any longer. As I pondered my next move in this hopeless situation, I noticed something strange. The button to the 9th floor was lit up, an ominous, crimson-red colour. Before I could do anything else, my phone started ringing. I checked the call. It was my wife. I answered. "Babe, fuck. I don't know why I didn't even think to call you. I'm trapped in an elevator and fucked up shit is happening, and maybe I should call the cops. Fuck Hun, don't go to the 9th floor. What? Wait. How do you even? It's a trick, honey. You have to trust me. The man from before was lying to you. It's not safe. None of this has been safe. How do you even know everything that's happening? You just need to trust me, hun." I paused. "So, what do you want me to do then?" A demon on the other side of the phone answered this time. "Go to your interview." I hung up the call, and in a panic, I mashed on the 9th floor button. The elevator started rising again. Even with me hanging up the call, the muffled sound of the demonic voice coming from my phone continued. "Go to your interview. Go to your interview. Go to your interview." I pulled out my phone and flung it to the ground as hard as I could. I stomped on it angrily. The warped sound of "go to your interview" slowly started dying out. But suddenly, the elevator started shaking. It was continuing to go up, but it was faster than usual. Really, really fucking fast all of a sudden. Almost like the 9th floor was now way below me. It felt like an amusement park ride with no brakes on it. Loose, dangerous, flinging up at an insane speed, almost as if it was falling upwards. But I pressed 9. I screamed to myself, exasperated. It didn't matter. Now arriving at the 41st floor. God, what the fuck? I was brought to my knees by the speed of the elevator, travelling faster and faster. Now arriving at the 90th floor. The buttons didn't even go past 52. Now arriving at the 141st floor. Fuck. Now arriving at the 230th floor. Now arriving at the 401st floor. I felt like I was inside a bullet. The pleasant voice of the elevator lady was getting deeper and deeper as we rose. Now arriving at the 840th floor. The voice started croaking, a demonic sound this time. Now arriving at somewhere nice. A sudden halt. The elevator stopped. The doors didn't open though. The panel above the elevator doors had no indication on what floor we were on. As I sat, I heard what could be best described as the sounds of hell coming from outside the elevator. Low grunts of pain, crackling, a dark hymn. Was this where I was supposed to get off? Before I could ponder the question further, I heard a soft tapping on the elevator, a voice from outside. "Do you want to trade?" said the voice. I decided to bite, for reasons I still don't fully understand. "What do you mean? What if you stay on this floor forever and I get to go home?" I think I'm good, but I really want to go home." It almost sounded like the voice of a kid. Fucking hell. I'm sorry, kid, I mustered back. "It's okay." An awkward silence between us. "He told me that he wants to wish you a happy birthday," said the kid. I think he's got it wrong. Today isn't my birthday." "It is," he responded. "It's the first day of your new life. Your birthday. He wants you to look at the TV." "What?" I looked at the TV in the top corner of the elevator, hoping to see the one constant I'd had during this whole cursed trip, the weather. Instead, the TV was now showcasing what looked to be CCTV footage, grainy footage from a camera, of the exact elevator I was in, a live feed of this exact moment. Except, the TV showed me lying down, looking up with a wide smile on my face, and something above me on the ceiling, looking straight down at me. Him. The lights in the elevator went off. The elevator plummeted downwards as I closed my eyes and screamed for dear fucking life. I waited for the impact, for what I knew was my demise. Here it comes. Here it fucking comes. I'm not ready. I'm not ready at all. Now arriving at the 9th floor. Ding! The doors opened. Wait, what? 9th floor. I peeked out from the elevator. Another reception desk. Wait, is this really the... I was interrupted by a voice from the outside. "You coming out or what, you fucking moron?" I got to my feet. The feeling of distrust, anxiety, whatever you call it, my fear intuition, it was gone. I felt light. Fuck it. I stepped onto the floor and approached the counter. The receptionist handed me what looked like a button for the elevator. "For the ground floor," she said. "Single use only." I took it and headed towards the elevator. Then I turned back to face her. "Can I maybe take the stairs?" She shook her head. "If you didn't like the elevator, then you're really not gonna like the stairs." Fair enough. I got into the elevator. I said a silent prayer to myself as I put the button where it belonged. It fit without any issue. I pressed it and the elevator went down. It was a smooth ride. Now arriving at the ground floor. Ding! As I got ready to exit, I realised that the ground floor button was missing once again. Strange. I didn't linger on it. I marched out, ready to get the fuck out of this building. I noticed a woman running onto the elevator. I tried to stop her, but something in my body wouldn't let me. The most I could muster was putting my hand on the door to relay a message to her before the doors closed. Don't get off until you reach the 9th floor, no matter what. The woman just smiled at me. Happy birthday, Michael. That occurred on a thin stretch of Blackwater in northern Australia. This particular story has inspired two fairly popular horror movies from 2007. They are Blackwater and Rogue. But before we get into today's story, if you enjoy my stories, please subscribe. We upload 1 or 2 times every week. Alright, let's get into today's story. At 11:40 a.m. on December 21st, 2003, 3 young men who were long-time childhood friends hopped in a truck and began travelling south. They were 22-year-old Brett Mann and 19-year-olds Sean Blowers and Ashley McGull. They lived in a coastal city called Darwin, which is actually the capital of the Northern Territory in Australia. The NT, also known as the Top End, is located in the central north of the continent. It is 6 times larger than the UK, but has 280 times less people living in it. Specifically, the UK is home to roughly 70 million people, whereas the Top End is home to only 250,000 people, and half of them live in Darwin. There are many reasons why the Top End is so underpopulated, ranging from politics to poor infrastructure. But the most obvious reason that so few people choose to live in this part of Australia is because it's wildly rugged and dangerous. It is scorching hot year-round, and the weather in general is just unbelievably unpredictable and violent. And as the old saying goes, all the animals there are trying to kill you and each other. But Brett, Sean and Ashley had grown up in Darwin, and so they were accustomed to the hazards of living in the Top End, and so they weren't really concerned about them. What they were concerned with was finding things to do and not getting bored in the city that particular day. In order to ward off boredom, the trio had decided they would head out to a salt flat that was located about 50 miles to the southwest of Darwin. It was this wide open plain that they could just race around on their quad bikes on, and so they loaded these quad bikes into their trailer, attached it to their truck, they hopped in their truck, and at 11:40 a.m. they started heading south out of Darwin. The first eye they were on was this fairly desolate dirt ard that wound around through the wilderness, and it passed by the iconic eucalyptus trees that are very well known in Australia. It passed by palm trees and giant termite mounds, and after driving on this dirt ard for about 30 minutes, the trio passed by the Tumbling Waters Holiday Park, which is a vacation resort for adventurous families. And then, beyond this park, there really was no more civilization. They were headed right into the outback of Australia. And so, this was kind of like the last mark of civilization. And so, the trio, they drive for another 30 minutes past the park. And at some point, all of the trees on either side of the road start getting more and more dense until they begin kind of encroaching over the road, as if it looks like you're driving directly through the heart of a jungle. And they would have recognised this change in scenery as meaning they were nearing the Finnis River, which was off to the right beyond all of the trees. So, they couldn't see it, but they knew they were close, and the Finnis River was not a huge waterway. It was a 30-mile stretch that ran east to west through the Top End, and what it was known for was being very brackish and dark. You could not see into this water more than maybe an inch or two, so it almost appeared black. And so the trio continued, driving along through this kind of jungle atmosphere until the left side of the road began to thin out again. And then it eventually revealed the salt flats up to their left. And so at that point, the trio pulled off on the right side of where the vegetation was still very thick. And then the trio hopped out of the truck. They went around to the trailer, they dropped the gate, and one by one, they pulled their quad bikes off. And then each of them hopped on and drove out onto the flats. That day, the flats were actually very muddy because it had recently rained really, really heavy in that area. And so the trio spent just as much time racing each other on the flats as they did trying to drive close to each other and spray mud on each other. And so for hours, they were out there having a great time. And then, at 4:30 p.m, they decided it was time to call it a day. And so they drove back over to the truck. They drove their quad bikes up onto the trailer. They locked it. And then they were about to get into the truck to head back home when one of them suggested, "Hey, let's head down to the water and rinse our clothes off and get all this mud off of us." Now, you need to understand, in the top end, the place you want to spend the least amount of time in is the water. People in the top end assume that in any natural water body that is not clearly designated as a swimming area has at least one animal lurking in it that will kill you. This is a literal precaution people in the top end take. And so this section of the Finniss River that these three friends were thinking about going and jumping into and washing off inside of, this was not a clearly designated swimming area, and so it should be avoided. But you need to remember these three guys, they grew up in the top end. They were used to living in this kind of wild area, and they'd also come to the salt flats so many times over the years, and they had jumped into the Phoenix River before to wash off and go swimming, and nothing had ever happened. And so really the idea that the Phoenix River could be dangerous to them, it didn't really cross their mind. They felt like, you know what, we've been there, done that, nothing's going to happen to us. And so they left the truck and walked away from the salt flats into this mangrove forest that's only a couple of feet off the road, and began walking towards this river. Normally, the trip from the road through the forest to the riverbank, basically where the forest ended and you reached the river, it would take about 10 minutes. But after walking in this mangrove for maybe a minute, they were already standing in river water. It was only a couple of inches of this water, but it's to the guys that clearly the river is very swollen from all of the recent rains, enough so that it overflowed beyond its natural boundaries and it's flooded the mangrove forest. But the three guys, they look at each other and think, "Man, what's the big deal? I'm sure we'll be fine." And so the guys continued moving on. But as the mangroves began to thin out, they began to slow down dramatically because the riverbanks on the edges of the Finniss River were very, very steep. If you were standing on dry land, if there was no flooding and you were right on the edge of the Finniss River, if you took even 1 or 2 steps into the river, you would slip down under the water and the water would be over your head. Now, as these guys are walking, because the ground is flooded with this black brackish water, they couldn't see the ground, and so they couldn't tell where the drop-off into the river was, and so they began to slow down. And then, when all the trees were practically gone, they knew they were close, and then one of them actually slipped and kind of tumbled down the edge for a second, but he turned and he grabbed one of the roots of the mangrove tree and pulled himself back up. And then the other two, after seeing this, they walked over and stood next to him. And the trio just stood there, looking out at this pitch black looking river that was very clearly moving faster than normal because of all this excess rain. But they kind of looked at each other and thought, you know what? It's not that big of a deal. You know, we'll hold on to the roots of these mangroves and lower ourselves over the embankment. We'll wash ourselves off, pull ourselves back up. No big deal. And so they each turned around and grabbed a root of one of the many mangrove trees that marked the edge of this forest, and while holding on, they would lower their lower half down, past the embankment until they were submerged. They rubbed all the mud off of themselves, being very careful not to let go of the mangrove at any point. And then, as they were about to finish up and pull themselves back up and get back to their truck, Brett loses his balance and somehow lets go of the mangrove root and slips down the steep embankment. And suddenly the current takes him away from his friends and out to the middle of this river, and before long he's getting pulled downstream. And so he yells out to Ashley and Sean, who had their backs turned to him. They turn around, they see their friend, and they instinctively leap into the river to try to go get him and help swim him back to the side. Now all three of them were very competent swimmers, and so this was not a high panic situation. This was more like an inconvenience, and maybe a little bit funny. And so that's why they left in no problem. They figured, worst case scenario is we'll drift somewhere down there and we'll get out and we'll walk our way back to our car. But as soon as Sean and Ashley were free floating in this river, they felt how strong this current was, and it was way stronger than they were anticipating. And so they actually started to get a little bit worried, and they looked up ahead of them, and Brett, who had in the water for 10 or 15 seconds before they left in, he had already moved way farther downstream than them. And so they decided, you know what, we have to get out, but we need to get to Brett first. We all need to get out at the same place. And so they decide they're going to swim downstream, meet up with Brett, and then get the heck out of that river as fast as they possibly can. And so they yell out to Brett too, hey, we're coming to get you. And they start swimming as fast as they possibly can. And with the help of the current, they manage to get all the way up to Brett relatively quickly, maybe a couple of minutes. And when they reach him, Sean and Ashley go in front of Brett. And then the three of them, they stop actively swimming, and they allow the current to just kind of carry them downstream. And as they're drifting, they begin scouting the left side of the river for a solid clump of mangrove trees they can swim into, because unless there's something to grab onto on the edge of this river, they can't pull themselves out. And so at this point the trio is definitely uncomfortable being in the water because of how strong that current is, but they're confident they're going to find a viable landing spot and they're going to get out of here, and it will be a great story. And so Sean is in the front, Ashley is right behind him, and then Brett is behind Ashley, and they're all about an arm's length away from each other, and they're drifting down this river for a couple of minutes. They're looking on the left side for a viable landing spot, and then all of a sudden Ashley just yells out, hey, I see something in the water. We need to get out, find the nearest tree, get out, get out, get out. And so Sean, he starts panicking. He doesn't even turn around to see what's going on behind him. Adrenaline kicks in, and he swims as fast as he possibly can to a tree that's popped out of the river. It's literally growing in the middle of the river. And so he swims up to this tree. He manages to climb up to the first fork of the tree, which is maybe 6 or 8 feet above the water. And as soon as he's up there, he turns around and looks down, and he sees Ashley. He reaches down and he hoists Ashley up to the first fork with him. And then the pair turn around again to grab Brett, but Brett's not there. And so they look around. They're thinking, okay, did Brett not make it to the tree? Did the current pull him around? Is he at some other tree? They're yelling out for him. They're looking for him, but there's no Brett. And so they're talking to each other, Ashley and Sean. They're saying, hey, did he call out? Did you hear something? Did he give some indication about where he was going? And they're saying, no, I don't know where he is. And so they start climbing up the tree a little bit and trying to look down and up the river to see if maybe they can see him. And then, all of a sudden, Sean notices something yellow flash beneath them in the water. And so he looks straight down and he sees this yellow thing down there. And so he nudges Ashley and he says, look. And so Ashley looks down. And as they're looking, they're about 10 feet off the water. At this point, they see this yellow thing start rising up to the surface. Now the water is so dark, they really can't tell what anything is unless it is at the surface. And so they're watching this yellow thing, and suddenly it comes out of the water, and they see it's Brett. He's got his yellow jacket on. That's what they saw. And Brett is in the mouth of a 13-foot-long saltwater crocodile. He is face down, and his left side is being held in this animal's mouth, and he's not moving. And so Sean and Ashley are so scared. They're just frozen. They're just staring at this monster that's in the water, that's holding their friend underwater, and they can't do anything about it. And for 2 minutes they just stand there looking at this animal, wondering what's going to happen. And for those entire 2 minutes, the crocodile stared right back up at Ashley and Sean, as if it was showing them what it was going to do to them once they got in the water. That I've done this to your friend, I'm getting you to as well. And so they're staring at this animal when suddenly it just kind of goes underneath the water, back down into the black abyss, and it, along with Brett, just disappear. Ashley and Sean are so terrified that they can't even grieve for their friend. They can't feel sad for him. It's like they just go into survival mode. And without saying anything to each other, they just start climbing up this tree as fast and as far as they possibly can. And they only manage to get up maybe a couple more feet to 2 more branches. One's at about 10 or 12 feet off the water, and the other is about 15 feet off the water. And so Sean makes it onto the lower branch, and then Ashley makes it onto the slightly higher branch. And then once they're situated on their branch, and one arm is firmly wrapped around the trunk of the tree, they're able to kind of breathe for a second and take stock of their situation. And even though, of course, the elephant in the room here is that their friend was just eaten by a crocodile, but it's like they can't process that yet. Instead, they start talking about, okay, well, our families, they're going to recognise our absence, and they're going to tell the police, and the police are going to launch a search, and they're going to come find us. Both of them were confident, or they acted confident that that was going to happen, but they also knew that there was no timeline for this. It could be hours or days until this actually happened. And so, as these 2 teens are sitting on their branches, the reality of their situation really started to come crashing down on them, because, yeah, they're safe in this tree. But how long can they possibly stay in this tree for? I mean, eventually, they're going to need to fall asleep. And if they fall asleep, are they going to fall out of the tree and land in the water with this crocodile? I mean, they just didn't know how this was going to turn out. And so, as the 2 began, and comforting each other, reassuring each other that, no, it's going to be just fine. Someone's going to find us tonight, or tomorrow will be just fine. As they're doing that, Ashley suddenly stops talking to Sean and just looks straight down. And so, Sean realises what Ashley is doing, and he matches his gaze, and he looks straight down. And at the base of their tree, in that black water, is the 13-foot-long saltwater crocodile. It's back, and it no longer has Brett in its mouth. They have no idea where Brett is. He's just gone. Saltwater crocodiles are considered the most aggressive and dangerous crocodiles in the world, and they're one of only 2 crocodile species that will actively hunt humans when given a chance. And so these 2 teens are helpless in this tree. All they have is some separation from the black water and this animal down below. And so they just find themselves staring straight down at this crocodile, and in turn, this crocodile just stares right back up at them. It's very clearly waiting for them. It wants them to come out of the tree so it can eat them. And so, the crocodile just continuously repositions itself all around the tree. It's just keeping the top of its head out of the water so its eyes can look up at them. And so, the teens are just praying that at some point it will grow tired of them and will leave. And after several hours, right as the sun is about to set, this crocodile does seem to give up on them, and it drifts under the water and disappears. After a couple of minutes, Sean, who is on the slightly lower branch, decides he doesn't want to be any closer to the water than he needs to be, and he's going to climb up to Ashley's branch. And so he very carefully stands up on his branch. He makes sure he's got solid footing, and then he reaches up and he grabs a branch with his right hand, and he kind of tests it, and he feels like it's pretty sturdy. And then he puts all his weight on it and tries to reach for another branch when this one breaks. And as soon as that branch broke, Sean tumbled 10 feet into the water. And so he hits the water. He goes all the way under. He sinks a few feet under, and immediately he's turned around and he's trying to swim as fast as he can to the surface. And he's just expecting at any moment this crocodile is going to bite him. He gets to the surface and he looks around. It's a little bit dark, but he can immediately see his tree. and he realises the current has pulled him away from his tree, and so in a panic, he starts swimming and kicking his legs as hard as he possibly can to get back to this tree. And he knows the whole time he's kicking his legs, he's just attracting the attention of this crocodile. But he's got nothing else he can do. He's got no other tree he can reasonably get to that will provide safety from this animal. And so, with every ounce of energy he's got, he kicks and swims, and finally, he manages to grab a root of this tree that his friend is still inside of, and he begins pulling himself, with his lower half still submerged in the water. And so, as he's dragging himself towards the trunk of this tree, he's just waiting for this crocodile to bite down in his legs. And finally, he gets to the trunk of the tree, and he's able to pull his body out of the water, and he clambers up to that original branch he was on. And then he and Ashley work to get him up to Ashley's branch. And as soon as he sits down next to Ashley and he's secure, they both look down and just a little ways away from the tree, basically in the area where Sean had just landed in the water, they see with the little light that is left, this crocodile swimming right back over to the tree, and it camps out right underneath. Sean had gotten out just in time. When the sun finally did set about 10 or 15 minutes later, it became pitch black. There's no ambient light in this part of the world. There aren't any buildings or cities close enough to this area, and so it is truly pitch black. And so they could no longer see the crocodile down below, but they knew it was there because periodically they would hear it repositioning itself right underneath them. Also, because it was so dark, the two teens could not actually see each other, and so they began holding on to each other. And then, any time either of them moved, they would announce their movement to the other, just so they knew they had not fallen asleep and were not falling out of the tree to a horrible death. And so a few hours went by like this, where it was silence with the exception of the sounds of this crocodile repositioning itself periodically. A little after midnight, a huge storm rolled into this area, and it began absolutely downpouring, and the raindrops that were hitting the river were so loud that the teens could no longer hear the sound of this crocodile, and so they had no idea if it was still down below them or not. But every time lightning would strike, it would illuminate the sky for that flash of a second, and in that flash, they would look down and there would be the crocodile. After several hours of this super intense downpour, the two teens also started to become concerned that all this additional rain could raise the water level of the river all the way up, high enough that this crocodile might be able to jump out and reach their legs. But because it was so dark, they couldn't actually see the top of the water, and so they had no way of knowing if the water levels were actually rising or not. And so they both kind of sucked their legs up onto this branch and tried to make themselves as small as they could, while still remaining anchored to each other and also to the branch. And that's how they sat for the next several hours, just hoping they would survive the night. Finally, when the sun came up that following morning, the teens immediately noticed that the crocodile was still right below them, just lurking at the base of the tree waiting for them, and they also noticed the water level of the river had clearly come up quite a bit, and so if they weren't rescued soon, there was a good chance that another heavy rainstorm, that crocodile would be in range of them, and there was nowhere they could go. They were as high up as they could get, not to mention the fact they were hypothermic. They were weak, they were tired, and if you fall asleep, you're going to fall in the water. And so the two teens, they knew they did not have much time left. Luckily, at 10 a.m. that morning, they heard the sound of a police officer who was out in the mangrove forest. It turned out their families had recognised their absence. They had called the police, and that morning a search had been launched. They had found their truck, and then had been walking down the river yelling out to them. And then they finally did find them. Initially, when they located these two teens stuck in the tree, they called in a helicopter to hover over them and lower down a ladder that could climb back up. But when the helicopter got close to this tree, the rotor, washed from the spinning blades, it practically blew the boys out of the tree, and this crocodile was still in the water. The rescuers could see it. The boys could still see it. And so there was this fear that the helicopter would literally send them into the water to their death. And so they had to abandon And so, as soon as the helicopter was off station, they had a boat come in, and the boat got right underneath the two boys. They jumped down into it, and they were brought to safety. The two boys were brought to a hospital where doctors determined that they were physically okay, but both of them were severely traumatized from what they had just been through. As for Brett, despite an exhaustive search of that river, they never found his body or any of his clothing or any belongings he had on him, and they never found the crocodile that killed him. So, that's going to do it. Guys, if you enjoyed today's story, please hit the like and subscribe. It really means the world to me. Also, check out my website, www.imsowet.com. Wet is with 2 T's. We have a ton of dope merch that is all custom designed by me. I work really hard to bring you all this content, so if you're feeling generous, go check it out. All the proceeds go back into making the content you love. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay wet, cuties.